Hi guys! Today it's time for the June bullet journal plan with me video. If you're new around here, my name is Anna and today we have this very interesting theme with otters and flowers and I'm so excited to share this with you. This theme is definitely my top 5 favorites of all time, so I really hope you'll like it too. I'll post the final flip through of the May theme on my Instagram and on YouTube as a shorts video, so keep an eye on that. And I've also started a very inconsistent TikTok, so follow me there if that's where you like to consume your stuff. But okay, let's finally jump right into this pretty ambitious cover spread thingy, which will take us a while, but I think the end result is definitely worth it. So I wanted to try out this cutout window thing because I recently bought one of those detailing paper knives and I just had so many page ideas for it. So we'll need 2 spreads for this cover page and I'm starting by sketching out the inner spread that we'll use for the cut pieces. So I started to sketch some lotus flowers here. I realized I've never drawn lotus flowers before on my channel. I'm sure they've been requested a few times and I thought they also went so well with this time of the year. I think my theme overall this month could be some kind of a Zen Garden with some happy little otters playing in there. Otter is definitely one of those words that is so difficult for me to pronounce, so please excuse me throughout this video. But yeah, I felt like I haven't really drawn many animals in the recent themes and I wanted to change that up this month. But yeah, let's get back to the flowers here. So I wasn't honestly sure what I was going for in this point yet, so I decided to just sketch these out with a pencil. Whenever I draw flowers like these, I like to use a photo reference, at least for the first few ones, so you get the idea of the correct shapes and everything. I think lotus flowers might actually be a very good flower to practice with because the petals are quite pointy and smooth, so they're actually not that difficult to draw. I personally find the peony type flowers the hardest to draw with all the little details and layers, so these were much more straightforward compared to something like that. It might also be difficult to make the flower look symmetrical, so if you struggle with that as well, I often like to start by drawing a circle in the beginning that I use as my guide for the petal lengths in each direction. But after a few flowers here, I also sketched some of these bigger leaves between them. I wanted everything in these inner pages to really stand out from the background and look like they are much closer to us so that the cutout thing would really work. But yeah, after these initial sketches, I took out this knife thing and used my poor sketchbook back cover as the cutting board. I'd never done this before, so it felt a little bit wobbly in the beginning, but I think working slowly and carefully really started to make it easier. I also made these corner decorations here because I thought that the top part of these pages would have looked too empty without anything. And I definitely wanted this theme to have a bit of that traditional Chinese or Asian style aesthetic, so I think these added to that as well. I definitely had some clumsy cut lines here and there, but you won't really know the small details like that in the final picture. But now that we have these window pages here, I jumped to the background. So for this we're gonna create a pretty simple wash with gouache paints first, and then we'll add some details to it later. I wanted to use gouache paints instead of watercolors for this to get that really opaque surface because I wanted this mint green color to really stand out. I also kind of added some gradient here towards the middle so that you could tell where the sky ends and the water starts in the picture, but I still wanted to keep everything almost the same color. I know this will probably not make much sense now, but it will in the final picture. I was also struggling quite a lot to keep these colors even. It was so difficult to paint a large area like this and keep the strokes straight, but I just kept adding color and evening things out until I felt like we had a nice background to work with. A flat brush was definitely the way to go here, and I felt like I had so much more control with it than you would with a round brush. So after we have this gradient here, I let this whole page fully dry and then cut it in half so we can place it to the outer pages under the window. I went ahead and taped both of these to the notebook and made sure that the white edges on the window thing will cover the edges of the painting. But now it's just time to start defining all our details here. So I started that by lining the flower sketches with my black micron pen to bring more definition to them. And I did the same for the leaves as well. Adding these black lines will make the front decorations really stand out much more again. And I thought it added a pretty nice contrast with the softer looking gouache background. But then after everything was drawn over, I also decided to add some color to these flowers. For this, I decided to use watercolors instead because I wanted to go for a lighter wash and I didn't want to cover the black lines either. Gouache paints might sometimes do that. And I honestly didn't spend too much time with the coloring here. All I wanted was some shading in the lower parts of the flowers and some color to the leaves as well. I think this light pink was such a nice contrast with the mint green in the background. And for the leaves, I chose a slightly different tone of green. I mixed some more yellow to this one to get that brighter tone so that they would still stand out against the background. But then after the coloring here, I decided to add some small details to the background painting as well. So I started that by adding a few rocks here and there. And behind this bigger rock, I also wanted to paint this small otter just because I wanted them to be a part of this theme. And of course, there should be one on the cover page too. This was so tricky to paint though, because it was so small. So I think I didn't do the best job here to really capture all the details. This is definitely one of those types of details that you need to look from afar for it to make sense. But then lastly, I thought that the sky was missing something, so I decided to add some of these white swirly clouds. I used white gouache paint for these as well, and I also sketched these out slightly off camera. These types of clouds are surprisingly difficult to draw and made me really appreciate all the beautiful traditional style cloud decorations. And then of course, as the very last step, I added the June title here to the top, and I did that by using my white paint pen. And I also added a small shadow to it with my black pen. And as always, I'll add this theme to my online shop as a digital download. I had to edit these cutout things for it slightly, but I actually think this theme worked really well in the digital style as well. I also added some new sticker collections to the shop last month and made an update to the older stickers as well. So if that's something you're into, definitely go check it out. Links to everything are always in the description. But yeah, that's it for the commercial break of the month, and now after all the time and effort here, we're finally done with the cover spread. I think this is one of my all-time favorite covers. I really liked how this turned out. The page is a little bit difficult to close, not gonna lie, but it definitely inspired me to play with more of these cutout designs in the future as well. Okay, but now let's move on this setup, shall we? So next, I wanted to set up a very simple monthly calendar spread, and I started this first page from our big June title here at the top. I'm using this typical cursive font I often use in my videos, and I've really been enjoying this very minimal lettering style recently. But yeah, after that, I actually kept this calendar side very simple and minimal, mainly because there will be a bigger decoration in the other page, and I kind of felt like this whole theme needed something very minimal to balance out everything else. So I went for this small floating type of calendar, and I actually didn't finish this fully yet because I didn't know what colors to use here. So after setting these minimal boxes here, we're actually gonna jump to the next page before adding the finishing touches here. So we'll start this page from this bigger lotus flower drawing. I followed this absolutely beautiful picture I found and wanted this one to look very smooth and delicate. And so I kind of decided to follow the cutout style of the cover page and make the center flower here kind of stand out against the rest that we're gonna paint to the side of this page. But first, I pretty much followed the same steps here. So I first sketched this flower with a pencil and then intensified all the outlines with a black pen. Then I added some color here with watercolors again, but instead of going for the same light pink color, I wanted to keep this flower a little bit more neutral. So I just added some shadows with this light gray color and then added some of this orange yellow to the center and lower part. But after that, I took out the same paper knife and cut this page in half, following the outlines of the flower so that we have this Dutch door space behind it. Then I prepared another piece of my watercolor paper and painted it with the same mint green color that we did for the cover page. I wanted this color to be dark enough that a white paint would stand out against it, but still have as light and fresh look as possible. And if you're wondering, my paints were completely dried on my palette in this point, but for some reason I was determined to use what I had left. So that's why the layers are a little bit patchy, but it won't really show up in the final picture. Anyway, after this wash of gouache had completely dried again, I attached this to my journal and cut it in the right shape. And then I started to sketch some more flowers and leaves here, but this time I wanted to go for a little bit different style. So instead of coloring the flowers fully, I decided to just draw the outlines with a white pen to create this line art type of look. And by doing that, the bigger flower in the center here also stood out from the rest. This step definitely took a while, and after drawing the flower outlines here, I also wanted to add some color to the leaves, but I thought it would have looked a little bit messy if I draw everything with the same white pen. So I decided to go for a darker color in the leaves instead. So I first tried out this green pen, but it was too dark for this picture in my opinion. So I just kind of went over it with this lighter, a little bit more muted blue tone. This blue color pen was almost completely dried up, so I tried my best to squeeze out as much color from it as I could. I also decided to add some white swirls in here because why not? And then lastly, I also touched up the outlines of the flowers a little bit. I think by making the outer shapes themselves a little bit thicker than the lines inside of the flowers made the shapes a little bit more clear. And I think it just made these flowers stand out a little bit better from the rest that's going on this whole thing. But after this was done, I just jumped to the Dutch door space I had here and used it for my June content calendar that's been crucial for me the past few months. I wanted to use some other color here to bring contrast to the blue tones, and I honestly don't know why I chose this peach color. I guess it was just laying on my table, but then I remembered I had this pink colored pen that worked much better with this theme in my opinion, so I just kinda tried to write everything over with it. I definitely felt like the calendar side still needed something, but I didn't know what it was, so I just decided to add something to it later if I feel like it. But for now, we can consider this spread done and move on in this setup. I know we've done quite a lot of painting in this video, so here I wanted to take a quick break from it and focus on the actual planning stuff first. So we're gonna set up another Dutch door layout here. So I went ahead and cut out these inner pages in half so we know what kind of space we're working here. This whole thing will be kind of a big monthly planning section, and I wanted to fit a lot of stuff in here. So I started by setting up these outer edges of this layout that I thought worked perfectly for the monthly meal prep. If you don't need space for meal planning, you could easily use this space for the monthly habit tracking, for example, by drawing small habit symbols to the top of the page. But I always like to plan the lunch and dinner for each day. I think it makes my life so much easier since I'm cooking every day, and having that stuff planned beforehand just saves so much time and energy. But after these very simple sections here, we're gonna move on to these two hidden inner spaces here. And I started by setting up kind of the main monthly focus or planning area. So I wanted this center title here to be different enough from the meal prep title so that you won't get confused which column belongs together. So I decided to go with this watercolor splash background and then just wrote the title on top of it. I tried out a white title first, but it barely showed up from the background, so I just changed it to a basic black title instead. But then I started to list some things here that will help with the monthly planning. So I basically set up a page like this every month so that I feel like I know what my goals for this month are. If I don't do this, my mind just goes all over the place, so this always helps me to keep myself grounded. I sometimes look back to my yearly goals before setting up these pages and try to see if there's something I could have time to tackle. So this time I'll write out 3 top priority things to complete this month, and then on the next page I left these more open spaces to think about my expectations for the month of June, and then this 15 check-in box that I use in the middle of the month to review if I'm still on track with the goals I've set here on this page. And then since there was this empty space here, I decided to use it to list some things I would do on a perfect day. So these could be some kind of ideal habits, maybe self-care stuff, or even something related to your work or things like that. I kind of realized that the colors I chose were really similar with the colors on my April setup, so I tried to switch them up a little bit on this second hidden Dutch door space here. So anyway, I decided to use the same style with the watercolor title and round boxes, and this space here will be just for my weekly overview planning. I always like to separate the month into these weekly blocks in my mind and then locate all the different projects that need to get done somewhere in there. But yeah, now that we have all this planning stuff ready, we can finally jump into the painting of this page. So as you probably noticed, we have this center part here completely blank, and that's where our painting will go. So this time I chose to create this fun little watercolor painting with 2 otters swimming in the middle of this lotus flower pond or something. So as always, we're gonna start everything from a pencil sketch, and I actually worked with this one quite a bit to get the otters right. There are actually so many different types of otters that you can get away with pretty much any style or face shape. I was trying to go for a little bit more cartoony, cute look and not try to make these super realistic or anything. You can probably notice that later, especially in the feet and the eyes that are definitely a little bit bigger than in real life. But after the pencil sketch, I added just the tiniest bit of black pen just to intensify some of the lines and dark areas like the eyes and nose a little bit more. After that was done, I took out my watercolors and started to work with this whole page. I decided to start from the background wash, so I used the wet on a wet technique here, which means that we are gonna wet this whole area first with water, and then I started to add some of this light turquoise color here. I wanted this painting to be very light and fresh, so definitely a lot lighter than the gouache paintings we did previously, and it was actually really nice to work with watercolors here. I've been in such gouache kick lately that I haven't created a full painting like this with watercolors in ages. I was a bit scared that I forgot how to do it, honestly. I think that's something we all sometimes feel like when there's a style or a technique we haven't used in a while. You almost feel like you don't even know where to start anymore. But then the watercoloring was slowly coming back to me here, and I ended up really enjoying the textures and light nature of it. But anyway, after this light background wash was done, I started to work with the otters next. And whenever I paint animals, I like to start very carefully from light layers and then slowly keep adding definition to the areas that I feel like need it. Again, looking through some pictures of otters will give you an idea of where there are lighter and darker areas in the face, for example. I think stuff like that will really bring out the shape of the head, which is often important when drawing animals, and then especially the area and colors around the eyes is very important for the facial expression of the animal. I think also using a very small brush will help you to create almost these fur-like strokes a little bit better than by using a bigger brush. It was a little bit difficult to paint the water around these guys, but I noticed that adding some almost shadows and these kind of waves around these work really well. And then of course the very last part of this painting were these leaves and flowers again. I didn't pay too much attention to these, to be honest, because the otters were definitely the main thing in this painting. But after everything was done here, I unfortunately had to cut this in half to be able to place it in the center part here of this spread. But anyway, now we're finally done with this whole monthly planning section here. I really like this layout, it's definitely something a little bit different. But now again, it's time to move on, and next we're gonna set up the weekly layouts for June. I had already planned to do something very simple here, but then I just got this idea from somewhere to create this almost book type of weekly setup in the middle of the spread, and I just had to go with it and see how it will turn out. So first I just cut out these next few pages here. I tried to go for that round corner look again, and then after this was done, I actually started from the first spread here, and I wanted to use this one for a monthly sleep log. I've been trying to track and improve my sleeping routine recently, and I thought having this type of slightly more detailed sleep tracker would really help me with that. So I will use this by drawing some kind of vertical line here every day from the time I started to sleep to the time I woke up. And then in the bottom I also added this nap section. Of course, taking naps is very important too. It's definitely a huge part of my daily routine. But then let's move on to the next Dutch door page here. And here I actually set up the first week of June. So last month I tried out this weekly task list approach, and it worked super well for me and made using the weekly pages much easier and faster. And if you haven't seen a setup like this before, I'll basically write all the weekly tasks that need to get done in some point to this list on the left, and then I can mark on which days I was working on which task. Then on the right side, I gave myself this small section here to write down some events or appointments I need to remember on a certain day. And then I just wanted to leave this extra space here for some random notes. I feel like this is such a minimal setup, but as you guys know, I like to keep it very minimal on the weeklies. I don't like to wake up on Mondays and realize I'll need to come up with some creative spread in order to plan for the week ahead. I just like to have something very simple, ready to go so I can get all the stuff in my mind down to the paper. But yeah, the next few pages here will be for the other weeks in June, and I will set them up later. But now, before moving on, I just wanted to add something very simple to the sides here. I think I was going for some minimal Asian style decorations here again, so I just combined some simple elements together. I think I might even add something more to this spread later, but for now I just wanted to add some more lotus leaves to the bottom. Then I drew some of these swirly designs, some misty mountains in there, and finished everything with this frame that's going around the whole page. But now we're finally coming to the last spread of this month, and that's of course the monthly review spread. I think you'll never see me missing this spread in my setup. Anyway, I started with a bigger title here again, and then I actually jumped to the bottom corner of this page to create this one last otter drawing. I did this one directly onto the notebook and kept it pretty simple. So I just sketched out this small pond scenery with these two little guys here. And again, I started from a pencil sketch and then worked my way up from there. Whenever you're working directly onto the notebook, you can't really blend and layer the colors too much because the notebook paper doesn't really like that. So I try to keep the colors here pretty simple and worked with a small brush so I could control the amount of water as much as possible. But other than that, I don't really have much to say here anymore. I think I used very similar methods to draw here than I did on the bigger painting. So first, finding some reference pictures and then building your way up from there. But after this final picture here was done, I added some of these monthly reflection questions here on this spread that I can answer in the end of June. So I will start a new journal in July as always. So I also wanted to add one question here about the yearly goals since we're gonna set up the new half year setup. I think the half point of the year is always a very good time to look back and see what you were planning in the beginning of this year and maybe see if you're still on track with those or if there's something that needs to be updated. But then on the second page, I started with this typical scale thing I set up every month where I just basically review the whole past month on these 5 different categories. And the center line here is kind of the 0 point. And then lastly, I left some space here to list the top and bottom 3 things or memories of the previous month. But that finally wraps up this June monthly layout. As I said in the beginning, this was definitely my favorite months in a while. I had so much fun playing around with the cut shapes and different Dutch tool layouts. It was definitely more on the time-consuming side, so I hope you can still get at least some new ideas from it, even if you don't plan to recreate everything. But as always, if you're new here on the channel and you'd like to stay tuned for more journaling and art stuff, definitely consider subscribing. The new half year setup will be up next month before the next monthly theme, and I'm super excited to be starting a new journal with you. But anyway, I think that's all for today. Thank you guys so much for watching as always. I hope you're having an amazing day or night wherever you are, and see you in my next one. Bye bye!